Predictability. It's that favorite order at your local cafe. It's binging The Office for the 6th time in a row. It's back in another miniature heavy game on Kickstarter and feeling fine about it. We love predictability. It's safe, it's pleasant. And over the years, I've come to expect the same predictability from certain publishers. Like, no one really delivers that guaranteed, "You did a good job, sweetie," experience quite like Stonemaier games. That is, until I played Origin Story. This game is so strange that it's shattered my perception of Stonemaier games. It's a fusion of trick-taking, tableau building, and superheroes. A trifecta of trendiness from one of the most successful publishers in board gaming. It should have been a massive hit. So why didn't Origin Story catch fire? I'm going to give myself 60 seconds to explain this game before we talk about how deeply weird it is. Origin Story is a game about your hero/villain's origin story. Obviously, it takes place over 5 rounds of trick-taking. This is where you try to win hands by playing the highest card in the lead-in card suit. It's a fairly traditional structure with 3 primary suits and 1 trump suit, but the twist is everyone is customizing their character's tableau by adding in abilities to modify their trick-taking capabilities. You can draw extra cards, you can reverse around, you can even discard cards instead of playing them. You can score extra by winning all of a declared suit. You can do all sorts of fun shenanigans in order to outmaneuver other players in the trick-taking. There's also some dramatic reveals, like there's a major event in round 3, and everyone reveals a final super ability to dramatically change the game state in the final round. Conceptually, Origin Story sounds like a properly blended mix of tableau building, trick-taking, and superheroes. And I would agree. Conceptually, it almost seems exactly what you would expect from a renowned publisher known for keeping games safe and approachable. But game after game, trick after trick, there's this undeniable feeling that the game is being pulled in 2 opposite directions at once. And that tension is what makes it fascinating. This game, way more than Vantage, Stonemaier's actual flagship release this year, has completely captured my attention. Because Origin Story is simultaneously the most Stonemaier game they've ever made and the most anti-Stonemaier game they've ever made. Stonemaier Games is a publisher I deeply respect. They have ushered in what I would say is the current era of board games. Wingspan has usurped games like Catan and Ticket to Ride as the general public's favorite, kind of tasteful, sophisticated board game. The games they make are the ones that you would expect to see on a table of a well-to-do family next to a copy of The New Yorker and an NPR tote bag. And it's really hard to talk about Stonemaier Games without mentioning one of the lead designers and founders. Jamie Stegmaier arguably has the best gaming blog and vlog series out there. And he is a titan and truly a beacon of resources and knowledge for all people who love games. It's obvious the whole Stonemaier team loves creating good games. So when I critique them, it's easy for Stonemaier bros to dismiss any sharpness as hating on Stonemaier games, because this publisher has hit the mainstream. It's kind of a punching bag for ironic memes and meta humor now. But let me clear the air. I actually kind of like Stonemaier games. I've played Viticulture, Scythe, Expeditions, Apiary, Tapestry, Stamp Swap, Wingspan, Wormspan, Finspan, Vantage, and while some are absolutely better than others, I wouldn't have played all these games if I at least didn't tolerate the Stonemaier design philosophy. But I see them as a publisher that has a particular focus, a blindingly sharp laser focus on one priority of game design, what I would call pleasantness. The games that are published by Stonemaier have this particular desire to please players, to make people enjoy every moment of their game, to relish in the artwork, the production quality, the gathering of resources, the creation of a tableau, the scoring of points. Even if you lose, there's still this feeling of, I had fun with my own little puzzle on my side of the table. And Stonemaier games are so engineered that every path you take, every choice you do, makes you feel good, even if it's not the optimal play. And this game design principle, that deep desire to please the player, it's been popularized as a North Star for so many other games as well, where the game's reward is simply interacting with the game itself. The fun and the enjoyment that people want to receive is almost guaranteed just by going through the normal motions of playing the game. The strongest example of this, to me, is still with Scythe. I spoke about this before, but I don't find Scythe a very good competitive game. I see it more like a light interaction efficiency puzzle that is really meant to make people feel good about their faction's machine, as we all kind of ramp up our engines together. Then that engine, it's kind of translated into this point salad-esque final calculation, where everyone walks away happy with their own little efficiency puzzle at the corner of their table. And yeah, there might have been the occasional conflict between players, but it's rarely enough to actually hinder the pleasantness that's in the game's design. And I think that's fine. Over the years, I've realized how important it is to have these games that just focus on making people pleased without much of a mess. The way I see it is that Stonemaier has spec'd all the way into maintaining that pleasantness. They've min-maxed their build to make sure everyone who plays their games are as satisfied as humanly possible. It's baked into the design formula. So when I played Origin Story, I felt kind of uncomfortable and almost shocked. Origin Story is pulled apart in a way that no other Stonemaier game is. It really wants to achieve that pleasantness that other games have. It wants you to feel like you're directly involved in your character's unique story. That personal progression from a dreamy stargazer into a galactic force, or from a friend of the animals to a force of nature. The game wants you to feel a personal connection to your tableau, and it's easy to envision a narrative. I want to see my hero's journey unfold, how the powers evolve, and how I can create that thread during the game's 5 rounds. But then the mechanics kick in. Trick Taken is a very interactive and very mean and ultimately an anti-Stonemaier mechanic. It's a gameplay foundation that's all about reading weaknesses and striking where it hurts. It's not a mechanic that can really create positive player interaction, and especially relevant. You can't even retreat to your corner of the table to optimize in peace. When you play Origin Story, the Stonemaier part of the game is localized to this very narrative sense of building up your hero's powers. It's thematically satisfying trying to pick out a power that matches with your narrative on your hero's journey. You might see a mysterious backstory and then add some spy tools, and then you build your character from a narrative perspective. And I think for most people, this growth and planning phase is very pleasant, and it is very Stonemaier-y. But then the Trick Taken takes charge, and the story you wrote for your hero gets put to the test. Sometimes that test works out fine. Sometimes you have that synergistic combination that just wins 6 out of 8 tricks. But often, and hilariously, the story you wrote for your hero just falls flat. And this is something that completely shatters that reservoir of pleasantness. It feels so anti-Stonemaier-y in a way that actually made me question if I was understanding the rules properly. But no, Origin Story is a mean game in a very personal way. You can tenderly choose your powers, craft a narratively perfect character arc, and the game will absolutely let you crash and burn anyways. And let's look back at Scythe. It looks like a war game. It has mechs, leaders, territorial control, a power track, combat, but the reality is it's this pleasant efficiency puzzle with minimal interaction. People expect to see confrontation when they see the box, but the gameplay rewards you for staying in your own lane and optimizing your engine. Origin Story is the complete opposite. You see the beautiful watercolor artwork that exudes optimism. The personal tableau promises a hero's journey. And all the choices you make, all the powers you gain, it should feel like it's leading to a satisfying character arc. But then the Trick Taken begins, and your carefully crafted hero gets absolutely demolished. And I actually love them for this. It feels so strange. It's like an anti-Stonemaier game. I've seen some online chatter about how this game is unbalanced or unfair. Like if your powers and draws don't synergize, you're just at the whim of whatever dominant force at the table decides. And I think that's the wrong angle of critique. The game isn't unbalanced in the most traditional sense. There isn't a single dominant strategy you can rely on game after game. Almost all of the powers are good in the right situation. What people are experiencing is Origin Story fully embracing 2 stages of cruelty. Random draws that determine your potential, and then another set of random draws that determine how well you can optimize that hand. If either fails you, the game offers 0 sympathy. It's almost a cruel joke. You can pick Sylvia, this optimistic stargazer character, So you want to stay thematic. You draft telekinesis and some other psychic celestial powers. And you're plucking away round after round, making this narratively satisfying character arc that would work perfectly fine in any other Stonemaier game. Or another person at the table plays a spy-inspired hero who has an undercover backstory with all these high-tech gadgets like a truth serum and a utility belt. It all feels narratively cohesive. Meanwhile, someone else at the table just ignores theme entirely. They pick powers purely based on what combos with their hand. And they just flat out dominate everyone. They destroy your happy little tableau that was all centered around making a neat, fun story. You fell for the trap and became too immersed in the pleasantness of tableau building while they were optimizing without a drop of narrative cohesiveness. In other Stonemaier games, this form of play is accepted and functional. Like if you play Scythe and you just really love mechs, go that way, build up those mechs. Or if you played Wingspan and you just love laying eggs, that works perfectly fine. These games don't punish you for interacting with the game in a way that feels good to you. But Origin Story? The game secretly wants you to abandon the narrative and find the combos that work best with your hand. Whether that's the ability to transform into a bear and fly, or being able to reverse time while being the best friends with a fire elemental. The player's desired narrative is what needs to be sacrificed for mechanical success. Now, some people might be thinking this is all fine. Thematic expression isn't necessary for good gameplay, and I would agree. I just think it's weird. It felt weird buying a Stonemaier game and getting absolutely dunked on by picking abilities that I thought would be narratively satisfying. It's a mean game that relies heavily on optimizing for each of the round's hands that are dealt. Now, you could also just be thinking, isn't that just skill expression? Good players will optimize. And yes, absolutely. Skill expression matters. Seeing combos, playing tricks well, that's the core of the game. But there's also a huge potential of randomness that can absolutely ruin your build. The game needs both a high level of strategizing, but also a huge amount of luck that makes your strategy work between multiple rounds. I think the theorized solution for having a really bad hand was this ability to flip into being a villain. If you decide to turn as a villain for the round, you get 4 points if you don't win any tricks. But for some unknown reason, the game doesn't scale hand size or points depending on player count. So often, it makes sense to go as a villain in a 5-player game and not so much in a 3-player game. Plus, there are some abilities that work fantastically for a villain, and if they're not drawn, you'll likely be subject to your draws without much control. It's absolutely wild that a game mechanic that is supposed to help balance the game starts to feel incredibly useful or completely obsolete depending on player count and the random draws. And all of these issues, I don't actually think it's that bad. I think it's actually more of a boon than a hindrance to the game. Let's talk about a place where dreams go to die. Dota 2. In Dota 2, there's a game mode called Ability Draft. You would Frankenstein your own hero based on a draft from a shared pool of abilities. In many of those games, 1 or 2 players would have an absolutely broken combo of abilities that they saw and managed to make work. But if someone else came into one of those kind of Frankenstein Dota games and were expecting to have a finely tuned game that was balanced between all abilities and all potential permutations, they would walk away thinking that the game was fundamentally flawed. But that person would leave without realizing that creating the broken combo and steamrolling through people was the appeal of the game. Really, the joy of those kind of games is finding those unfair builds and just kind of taking control of the situation. And in a lot of ways, Origin Story is the distilled board game version of this. It's scaled down, it's more manageable, but it's chasing that same dopamine of creating a broken combo that just crashes around. And I actually kinda love it. The game rejects personal narrative cohesiveness for this RNG optimization and just going straight on hopium. I love that being a villain just obliterates when paired with the right combination of player count and abilities, and it's absolutely horrible in other scenarios. It's a game that I want to play again because it's unhinged. It feels immensely polished in some ways, like the artwork is beautiful, but then you get to the trick taken and you're being absolutely blasted by the zaniest powers and the most outlandish chaos. It becomes a giant maelstrom of abilities full of crippling failure. And I barely touched on some of the biggest RNG. There's this round 3 event that completely changes what's going to happen for that round, and there's a round 5 hero reveal that can dramatically alter the game state. It really just doesn't feel like you can plan around these. Both of these moments can lay upon bountiful rewards for some builds, while horrendously punishes others. So yes, the game is swingy. Yes, it can have a runaway leader. But I really just don't see it as a design flaw as much as it is an appeal to create a hero that is the broken combo. When you really sit down with it, I think this was the only real possible result. Between the card draws, the power availabilities, the events, the reveals, this game creates this strange state of optimization nihilism. You can't plan 3 rounds ahead because too much will change. All you can do is pick the best tool for right now and hope. And I know people think it's unbalanced, but there really wasn't one single dominant strategy that works every game. Instead, certain combinations of powers and cards will dominate each individual round. And look, maybe I'm just bad. I definitely haven't explored all of the permutations and every single possibility. But I think this combination of having access to really powerful tools, but also being under control of a ton of RNG, while simultaneously needing to abandon this narrative cohesion, is just somehow a really interesting and weird experience. I respect it. Stonemaier Games, you did something I wasn't expecting, and it felt weird and somewhat frightening. I can sit here and say this is fascinating and weird all day long, but that doesn't answer the original question. Why didn't this game catch fire? The BGG ratings are fine, but not really exceptional. The watch it played views are notably lower than other Stonemaier releases. And while we don't have the sale numbers yet, the first print was out of 23,000, while Vantage first print was out of 50,000. So why? I think the core of it is that the game just feels wrong and uncomfortable. And this is going to sound insane, but I recently watched the movie Uncut Gems starring Adam Sandler, and if you go in expecting to watch this lighthearted, easy times kind of movie with the funny man, you're gonna get really uncomfortable really fast. And that's what it felt like with Origin Story. Stonemaier fans show up, they expect kind of pleasantness. They want to build an engine and feel good even when they lose, where your personal tableau tells you a satisfying story. They want the ability to play their way and still have fun with that warm blanket of feelings and just enjoy the process. But what do they actually get? A game that's all about direct confrontation driven by luck and this feeling of unpredictable optimization. A game where poor builds and bad draws will get punished hard. There are powers that bait people into this promised narrative, but only work if you treat them as tactical necessities. And this constant anxiety about whether they're thematic choices, kind of picking powers that match their character's story, will just get demolished by someone who is optimizing as ruthlessly as possible and got a bit of luck in their draw. And it's not just the Stonemaier crowd that's going to get confused. Trick-taking fans who show up expecting clean, elegant card play, they want quick gameplay with minimal downtime, a focus on tactical mastery, and satisfaction of winning through probability manipulation and skill. Instead, they get this weird, swingy powers that can break traditional trick-taking logic, and a tableau-building layer that complicates the purity that they come to expect. These trick-taking fanatics are left with a game that can't decide if it wants to be a trick-taker or a tableau builder. Neither audience really gets what they came for. But then I come along and I'm like this weird little thing, and I'm feasting away at it because it's so dang strange and it feels wrong and right simultaneously. You know what I said earlier about all of this being a cruel joke, about how funny it is that this game sets you up with this pleasant narrative thread and then just ruins you? That's really funny to me, as someone who likes games and analyzing it, and I appreciate the subversion. But to the average Wingspan player who wanted to build a bird tableau with superheroes, this joke is just them having an experience that probably feels unbalanced and random beyond reasonable control. The joke, the tension between the narrative cohesion and gameplay necessity, it will only land if you're in on it. But if you come into it expecting a pleasant, even-toned game of collecting points, no matter what way you decide to play, you're probably going to feel really bad. And the brutal truth is that most people don't buy games to feel bad. They buy games to have fun. Origin Story might be interesting to designers and critics, but interesting doesn't necessarily sell copies. Pleasant sells copies. Or maybe, and hear me out, maybe it's not meant to be this fascinating subversion. Maybe it's just a game that couldn't commit to an identity, and I'm calling it fascinating because it somehow clicked with me and reminded me of an older game mode that I used to like. Maybe the cruel joke just isn't intentional. Maybe it's just flimsy integration of incompatible systems and confusion between the narrative pleasantness and the gameplay meanness. I don't know what the intent of the design was. I took a look at some of their designer diaries and inspirations, but I couldn't find a clear answer. What I do know is what it feels like to play. And when I see someone at the table going, ooh, oh my hero, they love nature, I'm gonna take all the animal powers, building this beautiful narrative portfolio of earth tones and friendly animals, that's when I start scheming, because my incoherent pile of nonsense is about to completely demolish their story. Origin Story has you abandon your pleasant tableau building for the cold embrace of pessimistic optimization against unrelenting randomness and chaos. It's a fascinating experience that feels so simultaneously stonemaier-y and anti-stonemaier-y, it left me a bit stunned. But fascinating experiences don't always catch fire. Sometimes they just flash across the sky, confuse a bunch of people, and then they fade away when everyone goes back to playing the next span-type game. And I hear the standard critiques about the game balance and the weirdness that happens at different player counts. Even to me, some of the graphical design is just plain ugly. Like, look at these score and tracker masks that just look so out of place. But I'm willing to look past all of that because I think the weirdness is worth it. And you know what? I'm a little sad. This game was a bit of a risk, I feel. It didn't have that chugging hype machine like Vantage did. It didn't get that huge spotlight. And maybe that's why I needed to talk about it. It's a game that I can honestly say is unexpected and extremely strange. I feel like this game evades a traditional score out of 10. It's not a game that can be ranked by me in a way that translates in a meaningful metric. I would just say play it, and I think that it deserves a bit of attention. I guess that's it for me. As always, thank you for watching, and bye.